My name is Peter Clayton. I'm a member of Leicester Print Workshop and I'm a studio holder. I've got a studio upstairs here at the workshop. What we're going to do today is to look at some simple printing, pressless printing that you can do at home using perhaps materials you've already got, art materials you might have, and things around the house. In particular, we're going to look at making stencils and masks. Using stencils, cutting stencils, if you pre-plan your image, you can make very sophisticated, almost photorealistic looking stencils. But today, I'm going to do something a bit more freeform. Now, I've got a theme, but I've not really got an idea of how the finished picture is going to look. So it's going to be a bit of an experiment. I'm going to use acrylic paint, and as you can see, the palette's already been used once today. I've got some acrylic paint here, primary colours, red, yellow and blue, and black and white. You can also, acrylic's great to use for this because of its consistency and its drying speed. I might have to hair dry things as we go, but it'll be dry with a hairdryer, it'll be dry in seconds. So acrylic's good to use. You can also use watercolours and gouache for these techniques. You'd have to use your watercolour paints relatively thickly rather than adding water to them, so the paint doesn't go under your stencil. But watercolour and gouache are equally usable. Over here what I'm going to do first, I'm going to paint a background to print my stencils and masks onto. And so I'll start by doing that. I've got a few bits and bobs here for creating monoprint effects as well. This is the inside of a milk carton. I've not used some of these materials myself, so I don't know how they're going to work. It's all a bit of an experiment, really. There's some found hole punched metal sheeting here, a little bit of plastic carrier bag, and some polystyrene tile. You can use maybe an old pizza tray or something like that. I'll show you how I'm going to use that shortly. A little polystyrene block I just found on the way downstairs. So I'm going to use those to create some textures. First of all, I'm just going to put on some basic colours. It's going to have, the picture is going to have like an autumnal theme going on in terms of colour and shape. And so I'm going to just lay down some autumnal looking colours. I'm going to put the colour on quite roughly, and I'm going to use like a grid really as a starting point for me picture, just to give it a kind of structure. But you know, there's no need for your underpainting to be a grid. You can use all kinds of shapes. You can paint a lot freer if you like. I'm going to use a mixture of quite pure colours, greens and oranges, and some muted colours and greys. So I've got a variety of different colour effects going on in the picture. Putting it on, like I say, quite casually. I'll add some bits and bobs over the top. I'm keeping quite a lot of space in the picture, just so that there's plenty of room, leaving plenty of room to create textures with the stencils, textures and shapes for the stencils. I've got, so far I've got quite lightish colours and a very dark colour. I'm going to put an extra bit of light colour up here as well, just so I've got some tonal contrast to play with. I'm going to put some of these textures on top now. Let's use this little hole punched card here. I'm just going to paint through that. I'm using the paint relatively thickly, so I've not put a lot of water with the paint, just a little touch, just to make the paint mobile. But I don't want it too runny. Just put a bit more of this texture over here. And I'm going to try out this this plastic bag. Like I say, I don't know what the effect's going to be. It might look awful. We'll soon find out. Just going to paint some acrylic onto here. And just put it overlapping these two shapes. Just press it down gently. Ooh, subtle. That's more subtle than I was thinking, but I quite like that. And we'll use this cardboard. This might give a slightly different effect. If you're using this kind of waxy card that the milk container's made of, it's already got some textures in here where there are creases and things like that, but it's kind of thick enough and it's got a certain waxy feel to it that you could sort of make other indentations into it maybe. Let's try this, just using the end of the paintbrush. Or you could score into it with a blade to get finer lines without cutting all the way through. And we'll see what happens when I paint this up. I'm just going to put the paint on relatively lightly. And let's just put that there. Press down. That is subtle. You probably can't see that, but that's quite a subtle kind of texture going on there. It's not. I was expecting a bit more contrast. If I just hold that up though, you'll see that actually the plate that I've printed off, the card plate that I've printed off, has actually got more interesting texture than the actual print. So nothing goes to waste in this technique. You can cut that out, cut that up, use it as a bit of collage, maybe not in this picture, but in future. I've got boxes of this stuff in the studio, going from quite large sheets of things through to little collections of little bits of polystyrene and all bits of collage material in different sizes. So nothing gets thrown away, everything comes in useful at some point. We'll use this polystyrene tile next, I think, and what I've done is I've indented, like I did with the card, I've indented it just with the end of a paintbrush or something like that to create some textures, and I'm going to print that down here. Doesn't matter too much if the paint goes into the grooves you've created, because if you're printing quite lightly, it only prints off the top surface. Let's move that out the way, see? And just hold that up. So this is me. This is the background. The polystyrene worked quite well. Some nice contrast going there. So what I've got over here, I've pre-drawn a couple of shapes, some leaf shapes, and 2 different kinds of leaf. I'm not a naturalist. I know that's an oak leaf, but it's supposed to be an oak leaf. I'm not sure what this one is, but someone out there might know. I've seen a lot of them around recently. And so I've got 2 basic kind of leaf shapes here, and I'm going to cut those out. So I've got a cutting mat here. Just move this out of the way. And you don't need a cutting mat, but it does kind of keep your blade a bit sharper if you're using one. I'd just be careful if you're cutting on a Chippendale table, you know, that you might want to put something underneath it. And I'm going to cut this out. I'm not sticking that closely or that rigidly to the lines I've drawn. I'm sort of just using them as a guide. Just how carefully you cut your stencils out, of course, depends on you and the kind of picture you want to create. But given the time and so on, I'm just being quite broad and quite casual about the way I'm cutting this out. So that's one leaf shape. This bit that I've cut out, I'm going to call the stencil, because I'm going to paint through that. And the bit that I've cut out, I'm going to call the mask, because that we can mask areas out. So whatever you cut out, keep both elements, because they'll both come in handy. Just going to cut this one out. I want this line to be a bit more fluid. There you go. So again, oops, missed a bit there. So again, stencil and mask. Over here, I've got a couple of hole punches, which you can buy in stationers and craft shops and things like that. I'm just going to make a few holes with these. It might come in useful in due course. Different sizes. And again, I've ended up with holes, stencils, and a few masks there, which I might use as well. Over here as well, I've got some masking tape, which is it's low tack. I think they call it like precision masking tape. So it's not the basic kind of stuff. It will create sort of cleaner lines when you use it, and it shouldn't stick to the surface that you're painting on as much as the normal stuff does. Okay, so I'm going to have a quick break and dry this off with a hairdryer, and then I'm going to stencil on top of my shapes. Right, so this the underpainting now has been dried off. Acrylic is waterproof, so if you wet that, it won't come up except with a lot of scrubbing. so it's quite a nice surface to print on top of. Also, with it being bone dry now, when I put a stencil on top, it's not going to be picking up any sort of wet paint from underneath and transferring it somewhere else if I reuse the stencil. That's the sort of, I guess, that the big advantage of using water-based inks or paint. You can sort of dry them off. Oil-based stuff you can use as well, but you might have to wait a bit before you can overprint. So I'm going to start off with my oak leaf stencil here, and I'm going to just put that there. I've got a selection of brushes. Just dry this one off a bit, and I'm going to print through it. Let's just mix up. Let's mix up quite a dark. Oh yes, nice dark browny colour. I'm just looking at what I've got, what I've already created, and trying to find something that will complement what I've got. It's quite an old brush, a bristle brush. It's quite worn down, so it's not that great for actually painting anymore, but for this kind of thing it's pretty much ideal because it will create a nice stippled effect. So what I'm going to do is stipple down with the paintbrush, and I'm doing this so the paint doesn't go underneath the edges of the stencil. So I should end up with a pretty sharp edge to the stencil. You don't have to have a sharp edge to your stencil. It can be a bit woollier and a bit, you can allow it to bleed or be fuzzier, but we'll do that in just a sec. See how that would work. But this one I'm going to try and keep quite crisp. Some of the colours that I put on originally are coming through, but I kind of don't mind that. Helps, adds to the texture. So there's I'll hold it up upside down for the time being, just to save a bit of time, and I'll turn it the right way around shortly. So there's my first stencil, and we'll use this one next. And I think we'll have this over here, and we'll make that. We'll make that a little bit lighter, I think. It's quite a nice colour. Wasn't expecting that, but I think we'll go with that. He said, mixing it with a completely different colour. Like I say, everything's flexible with this technique. Just play things by ear. So up here I'm going to have quite a sharp edge going on here. And as I go through the stencil, I'm going to make it softer. So when I get down to the bottom edge, there'll be hardly any paint down there. It'll be barely discernible, the shape. But as I go towards the top, I'm going to put more paint on, so it becomes more definite and crisp. Like that. Okay, so down the bottom I've left it quite soft, up at the top edge a bit crisper. So that's it's using the stencils. We might come back to them shortly. I'm going to use the masks now, and I'll start by using this one. I'll use some of this masking tape. Oops. I get through miles of this stuff in my own work, but I try and make it last as long as possible. So on my table upstairs in the studio, I've got a row of like bits of masking tape that are weeks old that I don't want to throw away, because I'm just conscious of it being plastic, and so everything gets used multiple times. So I'm just going to use this, just tear that off. And this paint here is a bit wet. I should have dried that off, but too late. Sometimes when you put masking tape onto wet paint like this, or wet acrylic anyway, it can sort of tear the paper. But let's see what happens. I'm just going to mask. Yeah, let's put that there. And I'm going to paint around the edge. Just get some of the water off the brush. So keeping the paint pretty creamy in consistency. I don't want it to get too wet again. And we'll just move that over a little bit to the edge of there. And I'm going to stipple around this mask. So, I'll take the tape off, hang on to that for next week. Like that. So you can see here we've got a negative shape by masking the background out. And we'll do the same down here, I think. Or shall we? No, let's do it up there. Reuse some of this tape. All the time I'm doing this, I'm looking at what I've got and thinking about what my picture needs. So I've got this general idea of an autumnal leaf carpet, but I've not really got an idea of how the finished thing is going to look. So I'm going to put that over there, and I'm going to combine that with my mask for this other leaf, because I don't want this bit to get covered up. So I'm just going to put that over the top just to protect it. And we'll use a similar bluey grey colour I used just now, and so the top, looking pretty subtle. So that's how that's come out up there. What I might do is I'm going to reuse this holy stuff here again to put some more texture down here. But what I'm going to do is do it through the stencil. If it fits, I might have to make it a bit smaller, like that. So we might, hopefully, end up with the best of both worlds, really. Not sure what those worlds are, actually. I don't know what I mean there. I don't know which worlds I'm talking about. But Anyway, whichever worlds they are, we're going to get the best of both of them. Get some paint, and I'm going to stipple carefully through the holes this time, and right up to the edge of the stencil underneath. I think that's done it. So you get the shape of the stencil, you also get the texture of the holes coming through. I made these holes earlier, so let's make the most of them. I'm going to repeat this colour just to sort of help take your eye around the picture a wee bit and sort of link up different parts of the picture. So I'm going to put this just over here. Stencil through there, maybe put a bit down there as well. I'm going to leave some nice texture there. I don't want to cover all that up, so I'm going to leave a little bit showing through. Up here, I'm going to use one of these as a mask. Shall I use a small one or the big one? Let's go for the small one, I think. Yeah, I'm going to use the tape again. I hear the tape calling to me. So I'm going to mask off this area up here. And I'm going to use quite a dark colour, darker purpley blue maybe. Maybe, no, let's go for like a dark brown, I think. Yeah, let's go with that. This is going to be quite tricky because I need to hold that down. I might just do it with the end of my paintbrush and stipple around that. Again, I'm just going to leave some of that greeny colour coming through a little bit so it's not too solid an area. And we'll just lift that off with a knife. Like that. So I want to leave, there you go. And again, like that little circle there, you know, all these bits of stencils and masks that I'm using, they'll all pick up paint throughout the process of not just this painting, but I'll reuse them in other pictures, and they'll pick up bits of interesting paint, and that'll go in my collage box to be used to be stuck on a picture in future. So don't throw anything away. Well, not until your studio's full. And then you might have to do some editing. But that's next week's job. I think I'm just going to show you what I've got so far. I'll just tip it up upside down. Oops. I'm not going to do any more printing on that. I'm going to leave that as it is. I think it's looking quite well balanced. But what I'm going to do is dry everything off and just do one or two more things to it. So I'm going to take this over to the hairdryer and give it a quick blast. Right, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make one or two little additions. I've had a quick think about the picture and how it's going. I'm just going to mask off this area down here, and just like that. And I'm going to reuse my little mask that I used before, I'm going to put that there, and I'm going to paint over. I'm going to paint over quite a light colour down here. I want to bring some of this yellow or greeny stuff up the top, down the bottom. So I'm just going to mix up kind of a muted green, keep it quite light. Get me paintbrush again, just put that on there, and I'm going to stipple around it. I'm going to start off around the mask, get that out of the way, so if it slips while I'm doing the rest, it doesn't matter too much. I'm going to leave a shape here as well, I think, like a kind of semicircle shape, just occurred to me. Kind of looks nice. It's worked in about 30 other paintings I've made, so maybe it'll work again. We'll see when we take the mask off. Yeah, leave that on. Take the tape off. Alright, it's getting quite complicated, and the more you do this kind of thing, the more complex and maybe busy your picture gets. So just allow yourself to stop, you know, and maybe have a think about it, put it to one side, and come back to it another day, or a longer piece of tape. So don't feel like you've got to do it all at once. It can be like a slow build, have several on the go at once, and leave them around and come back to them to work on another time, when you've had time to think things through and absorb like what you've actually created. What I'm going to do though is over here, I'm just going to use a glaze of colour down here. Put this tape on and use this brush, I think, and I'm going to mix up a dark browny colour, I think, from the red, the yellow and the blue. I've not really used black in this picture. Black was from a previous project. The snag with black pigment, when you mix it with traditional colours like cadmium yellow and cadmium red and things like that, is that it can, if you're not careful, if you use it too much, it turns your picture a bit muddy. So I've been trying to stick to just the primary colours. There are a set of colours which are used in screen printing called process colours, cyan, magenta and yellow, which you also get in inkjet printing, of course. Mix those with black and you get some fantastic colours. They're kind of, because they're sort of they're colours that were made, synthetic colours really, that were made for the printing industry. They work with black in a really magic way, black pigment. And I'm going to put a glaze over the top here, and this is going to alter the colours underneath. It's thin. I've sort of thinned it down with a bit of water, and putting that on just to sort of link those busy shapes together. It's thin enough to allow the original colour to come through. Just scrub a little bit off up there. Put some more of that through. And I think I'm going to stop there. Before I started, I was working, by the way, I was working on a piece of thin card. You know, photocopying card, printing card will do. You don't need anything fancy. And it was quite smooth. The smoother your card or your paper, your surface you're working on, the more the textures you print will probably show up. But you could use like a rough surfaced paper or print onto MDF or wood or any other surface you like, really. They'll all have different effects on your finished work. But I was working, like I say, on this white card, and I taped it all the way around just to keep it stable while I was printing on it, really. So now I'm going to take that masking tape off, hopefully not ripping the picture. It is ripping the card that I'm painting on. And not only does it keep your paper steady while you're doing the printing, it also gives you a nice little frame when you take the tape off, and it gives you, if you're putting this behind glass, it gives you an edge to mount up to, so you're not cropping your painting, your picture, when you put a mount on it.